meeting to order. Roll call. Rod.
Aye.
Leah. Here. Jim.
Aye.
Carly. Here. I'm also here. Meeting has been properly noticed.
Yes.
Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
To read the mission statement.
Up to it. The Mount Horeb Area School District, in partnership with the community, is dedicated to nurturing, educating, and challenging all students, preparing and empowering them to be productive, responsible, and self-fulfilled members of society.
Thank you, Leah. Moving on to 2A is approval of the agenda.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion by Leah, seconded by Jim. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to 2B, approval of the June 2022 board meeting regular and executive meeting minutes.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Leah, seconded by Carly. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Thank you. Moving on to 3A, addressing the board. 3A, our school news.
Well, good evening, board members. I hope you all had a wonderful 4th of July holiday. It's been busy here over the course of the past couple of weeks as we just completed our first session of summer school. We're on a bit of a hiatus this week and then back at it again on July 11th. We wanted to let you know that the Community and Legislative Engagement Team, coupled with 2 area school districts, Verona and New Glarus, are going to be hosting a candidate forum for the 80th seat in the State Assembly. That will take place on Monday evening, July the 25th at 6 p.m. over at the high school. We thought maybe having a nice large area there in the cafeteria would be a nice thing to do. And we are already thinking about the start to school next Monday. An email will be sent out to all families regarding how to get access to their children's schedule and fees and all those kinds of great things that get us kicked off for the start of the school year. At which time we'll also include a link with regard to a survey for our school calendars, 2022 through 23, through 25. Those 2-year calendars, can't believe I'm saying that already, 2025-year calendar. We're going to ask for parents' input, and then we'll reconvene the committee here likely in September in order to meet the board's policy, which says that we adopt those calendars by October. And lastly, I want to extend a note of gratitude to Board Member Fisher. You're heading up to La Crosse, my old stomping grounds, this weekend to attend the WASB conference. And if I remember right, that's about Leadership Institute. Is that right?
It is. The topics seem to be focused on equity and governance.
Thank you for representing our board, as I know you do so beautifully. Maybe if we could impose upon you to present at a future board meeting all the things that you'll learn. That'd be great. Thank you.
Board members, any school news? All right, moving on to 3B, citizens' comments. Do we have anybody?
I don't see anything listed here, no.
Citizens' comments? All right, fantastic. We'll move on to 4 is our personnel transactions. It's just one this time, no addendums today.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Rod, seconded by Leah. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to 5, consent agenda. Is there anything anybody would like to pull out?
Motion to approve consent agenda.
Second. Motion by Leah, seconded by Carly. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to 6 discussion items. So we will start with our committee member reports, starting with, Adam's not here today, so we will not hear from Adam on that. But moving to Finance Committee, Jim, do you have a report for us?
Sure. So we've last met June 13th, so it's been a little while since we've met. During that time, we talked about some one-time funds that we'll get through the state from the federal government. This is the coronavirus relief fund in an amount of $321,324. And then also Get Kids Ahead initiative from the state.
Severe thunderstorm.
The fire.
Oh, it's a fire. Oh.
It went off 1 hour ago.
Yeah.
And the fire department came and yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, this topic has been this Manchester.
Oh, okay.
Do you know where he is?
He's in Perry?
Oh, I feel like I've heard of that.
Okay. It's like straight. Yeah, that was on Griffin State.
Get your blood pumping, make sure everyone's awake.
Yep, they're recording still.
Very good, right?
That's all right. Back to it?
Back to it.
Okay. No, so I was just saying, we approved 2 one-time funds, both from the state. The one is through the federal government of $321,324, both one-time funds. We wrapped up the fiscal year June 30th, and Scott and his team are working hard for the audit next week. We will next meet on July 18th.
Great, thank you. Questions for Jim? Okay, moving on to our second discussion. 6B is referendum planning updates.
Yes, good evening again, board members. We have, since we last visited, met with Matt Wolford from Bray & Associates, just to begin thinking about what might the capital side of the referendum, if any, look like as we just plan ahead. And so you'll see attached to this agenda a schedule that we're proposing from a timeline perspective for our work ahead. And as we've noted to you before, we already have a group of interested citizens who'd like to be part of a facilities steering committee. And we'd like to get that off the ground in late August and have their work continue through early November. We're proposing about 4 different meetings. This is a little different than the previous God Bless You steering committee because we already kind of know the scope of the work based upon the survey results we have. And so this is a model that Matt suggested would be most helpful to us in terms of pulling together the team and talking through those items that are germane to the survey. I'd like to see that this group meet in consult with our community and legislative engagement team, as I know that engaging your community in this topic is really going to be important, not just for the capital side, but also for the operational side as well. A piece that's important to us is making certain that we also engage in some staff listening sessions. And concurrent to those facility steering committee meetings, we'll be hosting a series of listening sessions towards the second half of September. Get people off the ground and get them started with the school year. And then talk about updates to the board periodically in the interim, with ultimately another community survey that we feel is going to be important and we're engaged community members' feedback, a little more refined in terms of the survey that was recently submitted and have a little more detail in terms of what potential costs might be. We actually did a backwards design on this timeline just simply because we know that we must have a school board adopted referendum question no later than January 24th. And knowing that we wanted to introduce a second community survey, working with school perceptions, we know that likely would need to come out sometime in the very early part of November with a report to the board at a second meeting. We don't typically have a second meeting in December, but I'm proposing, with the board's permission, a second meeting sometime during the month of December to share those results. And then come to some consensus so that way if the board does decide to engage in a referendum for capital, that we can begin the process of giving people opportunities to see the building, for us to talk with our neighboring municipalities and the like. So you can see a pretty aggressive plan, but a plan that we think is doable, and Matt gave his blessing on what has been proposed, and we anticipate, just as I'm going to look to my notes here real quick, I mentioned the question come January 24th, so I think that pretty much captures where our head's at least right now, as relates to the capital referendum. On the operational side of the house, we have some work to do with bond council. We welcome board feedback with regard to which of the three plans. I think we kind of heard last time that maybe the base plan and then the second plan might have been of most interest to the board, but welcome any feedback you might have on that so that we can begin talking with bond council about how to frame the questions. With that, I'll stop and answer the questions.
How much is the second question?
For the survey meeting?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, let me pull that up. I believe it was $350,000, but I would like to be wrong.
Why wouldn't we just roll that into the other and have one?
Survey?
Yeah.
Or
One question.
Oh, you could do that, yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
As you're pulling it up.
I know that's not
I'll
it.
give you some time, but if you could remind us of the first question numbers as well.
Oh, sure. So, yeah, let me pull this up for us here. Perceptions. Here's the survey. Yes. So the first question was with regard to a $4.47 million operational referendum to fund the items that we talked about before, attracting and retaining quality staff, maintaining our current programs and services, and paying for increasing costs. The second option, the next tier, if you will, was to maintain some of those one-time federal dollars that we received through ESSER, and those would be specifically for reading and math, literacy, staffing coaches, English language learners, and the like. That appeared to be, both of those questions, as you might remember from the survey, appeared to be very favorable across the board, whereas this next question was a bit tentative in that we were about a 50.3% approval rating on student support services, which would be about another $850,000 to fund some of the positions you see up above here.
Any feedback or thoughts? So you have the first two together, quick math,
Right, I mean, so,
4.8.
It's $75 per $100,000 of equalized property value. You're looking at 4.8 million thereabouts. And that would likely be how they would frame the question for us through bond counsel, but we have to make it legal in terms of what we cover. Our goal would be to have the board draft that question or approve such a question by August the 15th.
Okay.
Thank you so much for any feedback you might have, and we'll plan accordingly. Maybe we'll bring a couple of drafts to you at that August 15th meeting. Certainly we can keep this on the radar. And then we'll post the dates for our facility steering committee. And looking at about 3 to 4 meetings here before we try to get a survey out.
I do have one question about the timeline. So the board updates in August and October. I guess I would wonder why not every month?
Happy to.
Just so that we know what's happening and the direction that things are going.
Happy to.
And then we'll definitely have to know what happens after the facility steering committee ends, so I'm sure we'll be talking about that.
And then having you even approve a survey that would go out.
Any other questions, concerns, comments?
Thank you.
All right. Moving to 7 action items. Our first reading, revision to policy 443.1, district-wide dress code. Mr. Johnson.
So this has just a couple of simple changes. One, the main piece that changed was that hats and hoods would be allowed in 3rd through 12th grade. So that was a substantial change that made it come to the board. And then we did a couple of wordsmithings of other kind of some minor areas, if you saw those in red, but ultimately it changed. Katie Hauge did a whole kind of analysis of, is it worth the fight? Is it educationally harmful? A whole study with all of her staff, and kind of came to a pretty good, strong consensus that they should just allow it. So, just proposing to make that change.
Questions for Brian? All right, since this is a first reading, we'll see it again next time.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to 7B, first reading revisions to and renaming of policy 522.7, internet use. And we have Mr. Johnson and Mr. Flynn. So, she, okay, fantastic.
Keep you check.
So we took a look at this policy based on the WASB recommendations and took an opportunity to enhance and clarify a couple of things. As we noted in the action items, we are looking to change the title to make it more broad. It's not just about internet, it's about other things that we're using in the classroom with technology, apps, other services, and those sorts of things that would fall into this bucket. And then also looking at moving it from, it was only in our personnel staff policy, so looking to move it into the 700s where it's more about our support services and encompasses students and staff and is more broad in that sense as well. This was passed through our personnel committee as well as our safety committee and by a couple of staff that work more with our technology as well to get feedback, and they all approved as well.
Board members, questions for Sarah? All right, thank you, Sarah. We'll see this again next time. The first reading. All right, moving on to D, first reading revisions to policy 341.31, human growth and development. We have Mrs. Stroud.
Back at the June Education Committee meeting, this is one of 2 policies that were brought forth to committee members. We wanted to provide more clarity when parents and guardians receive communication updates and curriculum exemptions. So we updated this policy to reflect that language change. So that's the first section. And then we also added language for annual notices. This is something that we do every year as part of our annual notice. Annual notices both in the newspaper and on our website and emails to families, but then we want to make it more explicit in the policy as well, to put in writing that we do that. And then we also made some better consistency using the term parent and guardian throughout the document as well to clean that. That's all for this policy.
Board members, questions for Sarah? Again, a first reading, so we'll see this again next time. And I apologize, I jumped forward, so now we will go back to revisions to 343.42, early post-secondary opportunities.
Good. So the policy as it currently stands has some ambiguous language, which when doing the math allowed up to 36 credits that students could take through both Start College Now and Early College Credit Program. So because of that ambiguous language, we need to change that because you can only have a combined limit of 18 credits for the early post-secondary opportunities. So we cleaned that language up to reflect that need. And then we cleaned up some language about the waiving of the family share of the cost for the early college credit program. With students who may have undue financial burdens, we wanted to adjust that language. And we had some grammatical revisions we made as well. And last but not least, when we look at, right there, Dr. Sonner, when we look at number 4, part of the criteria is that we had initially a student is not a child at risk. We'll look at the at-risk policy. Brian Johnson will do that at the safety committee in July, and in August it'll come to the full board as a reminder of what child at risk means. But until that time happens, we thought maybe some better language would be a student who does not meet the criteria for being identified as a child at risk would be better language to have in this policy. Let's see, I believe those are the main changes.
Thank you, sir. Board members, questions regarding this policy? Again, first reading, so we will see this again next time. And now, sir, you're just, got a lot to do tonight. So we're going to ask you to walk us through the consideration of the 2022-2023 academic standards.
Yeah, definitely. So every year, per statute, at the first Board of Education meeting in July for the academic year, the Board of Ed reviews and then potentially approves the district standards in the various content areas that we offer in Mount Horeb School District. So those are before you, again, with the links to the actual standards. In going through this document, there had not been any major changes. This document reflects last year's version that's for those of you that were on the board reviewed. If there's any changes, it's just updating the links to make sure that they were live and accurate. So,
Motion to approve.
Excuse me, President. I have some recommended changes recommended language for proposal for a motion tonight. It's found here in administrative content.
Oh, good Lord. Okay. I move, it's fine. I'll just squint a little. I move to approve the proposed notice of the student academic standards that are in effect for the 2022-2023 school year. I said proposed notice was presented to the board with the date of July 5th, 2022 in the board's packet of supplemental information for this meeting, all pursuant to section 120.12, paragraph 13B and 118.31GA of the state statutes. Do I need to read the second one too? And
You intend to do this?
I do, and I move that the board direct administration to provide parents and guardians of the district students with notice of the board adopting student academic standards that are in effect for the 2022-2023 school year in a manner that is consistent with the requirements of section 120.12.13 of the state statutes.
That was great. You did a great job. That was awesome.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Oh, did you second?
No, I didn't.
I second. Motion by Leah, seconded by Carly to do what is on that screen right there. Sorry, can you repeat the motion? I'm sorry, Leah, could you repeat your motion one more time? So yeah, motion on the table, Leah, seconded by Carly. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
So motion still carries. You don't need a, any sort of. Okay. Moving on to 7F, consideration of private school transportation contracts for parents. This will be Mr. Gia.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for board members that have been a part of this discussion for the last couple of months now. The Buildings and Grounds Transportation Committee met, I think it was May 23rd. We talked quite extensively, actually, about this contract. We then had an opportunity back on June 6th at the board table to review this in its entirety and have dialogue. And then the Buildings, Grounds, and Transportation Committee met back at the end of June, just prior to the holiday, to review it one last time and to have any further clarifications that were needed. The contract that's in front of you has not been changed since those previous discussions, both at committee and at board level. And so we would be looking, short of any other questions, we'd be looking for a consideration for approval of the contract.
Does this one have a long paragraph I have to read?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Leah, seconded by Rob. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to 7G, consider approval for ESER 2 and 3 expenditures. Dr. Slera?
Yes, thank you again, board members. You may recall that we were surprised to learn in May that additional dollars had been allocated in ESER for school districts, and this amounted to about an additional almost $1.2 million of unanticipated revenue. And you previously recall approving a portion of our ESER 2 and ESER 3 expenditures back, I want to say, in April. And that was the result of us meeting with our community, meeting with our staff to talk about where are our needs. And that came through class size reduction and a couple of other areas that you recall. The new dollars come with some restrictions. These restrictions are called EBIS, or Evidence-Based Instructional Strategies. And ESER 3 dollars in particular that we received, about $791,000 of those new dollars need to be EBIS, about 100% of those expenditures. And then some additional dollars, the $358,000 that you see on the bottom half of this, or $386,000 you see on the bottom half of this, about a third of this document you have before you. 20% of those dollars, I beg your pardon, excuse me, none of those dollars need to be EBIS. So it got us to think about how can we best honor the work of the feds and their requirement for evidence-based instructional strategies, as well as some of the needs that we previously approved. And so we worked to realign those dollars to make certain that we're honoring that. So this little one-pager, we wanted to keep it short and sweet and simple for the public as well as for the board to understand how do we realign some of those previous ESER dollars. There may be some changes that will occur, should this be approved tonight, there may be some changes that occur just in terms of price of dollars, or maybe where we can allocate some funding along the way. But suffice to say, much of this might look brand new. The parts that aren't new, I'm happy to speak to if you want me to give you just a little Reader's Digest version of them. So that way you're feeling comfortable about what's being proposed here. What's the will of the board?
Yeah, I would like you to give us the Reader's Digest.
Sure.
Version of how others know about that.
Happy. Thank you. So we know that some of our network security is important to keep on updating, and that's what you see up above the top. This builds in some redundancy. This is called a storage area network, providing 2 buildings with redundancy for our backup systems. We know that our high school has some new safety protocols that will be occurring on the south side of their building with a new attendance office, and as you might imagine, that might need some attention in terms of furniture and the like. The Lexia reading we talked about before, the Dreambox for math we talked before, and we're interested in transportation student tracking system software. Scott, might I turn that over to you to speak to what that would do for us? And Felix.
Yep. Do you want me to?
I don't think I think there is a microphone.
Okay. So the student tracking was a topic that came up during the pandemic. It got us thinking about not only the tracing side back then, but also understanding the importance of understanding day in and day out who's riding our buses every single day, almost like an attendance kind of system. It also significantly helps us not only on the student safety side with tracking of students, it also helps us on the DPI side when we report data to them. We have reports that we can absolutely determine how many kids rode our buses on which days and what the mileage was. And there's a reimbursement funding component to that. And we feel like we're a little bit behind the eight ball in terms of this system, and we need to get trucking forward.
Thank you for the work you and Brian did in looking into this. The board may remember during a recent information and advocacy report, we discussed just the general composition of our buildings makes it difficult for fire and rescue to access through radio communications. And so we're proposing that we be a partner with the village in using some of these dollars to help offset the cost for what they're calling repeater signals. Thank you to David Reed and to Will Brueggemann, who spent some time walking the buildings last week with a couple of representatives as well as the police department there. That's a sizable sum of money, and as you may remember, when we did the information advocacy report, we thought, well, gee, that would really be a nice thing to do, but that's never happened. Well, thankfully, we have these dollars, and with your approval tonight, we can work to get to a yes on that. Much of what you see in ESSER 3, that $616,000, has been previously approved by the board. But I do want to take a moment to talk about the special education LEO or LEO program. One of the things that this process allowed us to do is to take stock of our current grants that we receive from the state around special education, and how couldn't we better utilize those dollars and repurpose them for some other features. And so out of the grants that were originally scheduled for special education, we talked about things like zones of regularity materials, restorative practices training, social emotional learning training, learn to be breathe programs, those sorts of things. Those are originally going to be part of some state grants. And we decided to put those into ESSER dollars in order to free up the state dollars to purchase those halos that were also part of a recent information and advocacy report. Halos are those items that will allow school district officials to determine when there might be someone who is smoking or vaping within our bathroom stalls at the middle school and the high school. And because ESSER dollars weren't permissible for us to use that, we've just decided to backfill that process using the special education items that you see there. LEO is a program that we're really excited about here, and after a great review and visits with several of the doctors who are helping to start this program, the results have been fantastic. It's really an investment in our staff's mental health and well-being. We spend a lot of time on the needs of our students, and rightfully so, but is there an opportunity for us to help our staff with the daily stressors of their job? And what can we do to help build capacity in them? And through a research-based, proven methodology, we plan to invite Dr. Raj from the University of Wisconsin-Madison to come out and visit with our employees over the course of the next couple of months to talk about how the brain works, how to respond to stress, and what we can do to control stress in our lives. He talks a lot about the front brain and the back brain, and how people who are high performers tend to use a different part of the brain than others who might just sometimes get caught up in the mire of frustration. And this is something I think our staff is going to enjoy. They tell us through the staff wellness surveys that this is a topic of great interest to them, and we want to do whatever we can in order to invest in them. So that would begin as part of our, assuming approval, that would begin as part of our back to school effort on August the 29th. ESSER 3 EBIS, these are those evidence-based structures. Some of these, again, look very familiar to you as you previously approved them. We've just gone ahead and reallocated them under these dollars because, as I said at the onset, ESSER 3 needed to have 100% of those dollars spent on EBIS. And then there's something called ESSER 3 supplemental. Those do not require evidence-based services. And so here again, we were looking at ways in which we can help make for a lighter load on our current budget. You may remember that right now we're proposing one bus be added to next year's budget. And We thought that maybe this is an opportunity to utilize some of these dollars to get us over this one-time expense. I failed to mention that at the onset of this, by the way. These are all one-time expenses, so we don't want to build them too much into our regular budget because we're not certain as to what dollars are going to be there for us. Softball lights. This is a matter of safety in our opinion for some time now. We've been working with the softball club. They have just been remarkable partners with this school district. Much of what you see out on the softball field is a result of some fundraising that's been done by the softball committee and our parent group. We estimate the cost of those lights is approximately $125,000 to $150,000. You may recall that that's shared property between the village and between the school district. And we know that the village's group has been working very closely with some of our facility representatives on things like pickleball and the like. And while pickleball didn't fare so well in the survey, we do know that pickleball is a new need, and the softball lights has been something that's been on my radar ever since I walked into the district 6 years ago. So we're proposing a partnership potentially with the village about this, assuming the board could approve it. And then we want to do better for our employees as it relates to access to their benefits, access to making changes to their elections, on their everything from their W-2s to any kinds of additional tax forms. And Skyward Access, a self-service module, will allow them to do that, even be able to prognosticate what their paycheck might be, as well as allow us to administer things like contracts, for example, electronically instead of paper-wise, and then allow people just to sign off on them on the paper. It does not cost us $10,000 a year to operate that. What it does do is it allows us to set that up, and I think there is a nominal fee, maybe a couple $100 a year, less than $1,000 a year that we think we can absorb into it. But this is the opportunity for us to get it off the ground. Insurance tracking is also important for us. We've been doing most of the Affordable Care Act accounting by hand, and now that we have some of these dollars, might it be helpful for us to utilize our labor force a little more wisely and get the insurance tracking module up and established. Again, this is another one of those fees that requires an upfront cost, but would not nearly cost the $10,000 annually per year. So, and I speak any. I know I went through the lickety split, but I also want to make certain you have what you need in order to make an informed decision.
Yeah, that's a good overview. I have one question.
Please.
Which parts were not previously approved?
Yes, so let's take them one by one.
I know we've done a lot of this, so I just want to know what the new stuff is.
Thank you. As I look at this ESSER 2, the top pieces that you see here, these were not previously approved. Lexia was approved, and so was Dreambox for math.
Yeah.
And then these down here in the ESSER 3, everything was approved with the exception of the special education and LEA items. And then ESSER 3 EBIS, I believe all of these were previously approved. Correct me if I'm wrong, team. Correct. And then lastly, ESSER 3 supplemental, those are all new.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thanks. Board members, any questions?
The radio repeaters, did you say that, is that fully our cost to bear? Or did you say that the village or the police department has any cost to the bear with that?
And right now, because we believe the need is there.
Yeah.
And if we can do something about it with these dollars, I have approached the village about helping to pay the cost of this. I have not asked them to pay anything because I'm hopeful that they'll pay for the softball lights and partner with us on the softball lights. It's one of those things that we both needed, safety-wise, and it would be in our buildings. We'd supervise it, we'd manage it. The village has been very, very good partners with us on a number of other things, and this might help us to get to a yes. We have to use these dollars by September 2024.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Leah, seconded by Rod. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to 8, we have citizens' comments.
Well, I have one thing, since you just approved the softball lights, we did forward that portion of our request onto the full village board from Parks and Rec. So that money is, as long as we approve it in October, then we'll be all set for that. So that's great. That's really exciting to see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good partnership, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to 9, future agenda items are listed. As always, if you have anything that you would like to have added, just let Dr. Steno or myself know, and we will get that on a future agenda. Moving on to 10, schedule of next meetings. Nothing really too bigger, just usual customary. All right, now we'll move on to 11, executive session. Contemplated closed session for section 19.85, paragraph 1, subparagraph C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business wherever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. This will be a roll call vote. Rod? Oh, I'm sorry, I need a motion first. I do it all the time. Motion by Rod, seconded by Leah. Now I will do a roll call vote. Rod?
Aye.
Leah?
Yes.
Yes. Carly? And I'm also yes. We'll take 5 minutes.
I don't know. We only have a few minutes for that alarm goes off again.
I know, I just jumped
No, if they're working on it, ready to get to that roll call.
That's why.
Right?